Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to USTA Florida's Here to Serve podcast. My name is Laura Bowen, and I'm the Executive Director here at USTA Florida. It's French Open time, and all eyes are on professional tennis. And my guest today has made a name for herself covering professional tennis for more than a decade. Florida native Blair Henley is a renowned host and sports reporter whose work has been seen at tennis tournaments around the world. In addition to covering all four majors, Blair has served as a stadium, digital, and broadcast host at many of the largest events on the tennis calendar, including Laver Cup, the ATP Finals, the WTA Finals, and more. As a result, she has interviewed the biggest names in the game, from Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal to Serena Williams and Coco Gauff, all helping to establish her as a trusted voice in professional tennis. She has also written for ESPN.com and Tennis Magazine, among other outlets. I had the pleasure of first meeting Blair at the Delray Beach Open many years ago, and I followed her career ever since. I admire her for the work that she does on the court, and she's also a very, very proficient tennis player and loves Florida tennis. I hope you enjoy this interview with Blair. She shares so many insights about our players, about the tour, and about the game. It's truly one of the favorite podcasts I've ever done. So please enjoy. Check out our social media channels and leave a comment or question. And as always, visit USDAFlorida.com/here-to-serve for other episodes of the podcast, including upcoming topics and dates. I'm super excited to have you as my guest.
I am so excited to be here, Laura. I mean, we go way back.
We do go back.
Exactly the same. I don't know how it's possible. Tell me all your secrets. But you do so much for Florida tennis, and I grew up playing Florida tennis, so I am so excited to be here today.
Well, you are certainly one of my favorite things that came out of my experiences at Delray. It was amazing to always be able to collaborate and work with you. And I have followed you continually since then. I love featuring women doing cool things in tennis, and you are at the top of my list. So the pleasure is all mine today. I'm so glad you mentioned that you grew up playing Florida tennis. And I was wondering if maybe we could start by you sharing a little bit of your background and how you first got started in tennis.
Sure. Well, I was very lucky because, lucky in two ways. Or blessed, I guess, is maybe a better way to describe it. But my dad is actually a teaching pro, has been for my entire life. So we moved to South Florida when I was about 5. And my dad is he's the director of tennis at Jupiter Island Club, still loves it, has never complained about work in his entire life, just absolutely loves sharing the sport and teaching the sport and giving the gift of tennis to other people. So again, we moved to Florida when I was 5, and I was able to be around the tennis courts as much as I wanted to be. And that sort of leads me to the second way in which I feel like I was very fortunate and blessed in the fact that I really liked tennis. I have 2 younger brothers. One is a golf pro. The other is a tennis pro. Neither one was quite as obsessed as I was with tennis. So I had the obsession to go along with the access. So I feel very lucky that I could play as much tennis as I wanted to growing up. My dad coached me when I was little. I, had access to all the tennis pros that worked for my dad. I'm sure I drove them crazy in the summer, like 9-10 hour days. And I'm like, hey, can we hit for 10 minutes? And they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, it's the boss's daughter. Like, I probably have to do this. But anyway, I just loved the fact that I could spend all day around the courts, hanging with my tennis friends, practicing as much as I wanted to. And I played a lot of Florida tennis tournament. So went through the whole, back in the day, we called them designateds. I don't know I know things have changed so much now. But
all the levels now, one is the national levels, and then all the way down to sevens now, which would be sort of more the entry level, shorter formats.
Incredible. Yeah, I know if my kids decide they want to play tennis one day, I'm going to have to figure out all
Well, they
this.
better play tennis. We need to make that happen, Blair.
So, so far, so good. So far, they like it. They don't necessarily love playing with me, but they like the sport itself.
Oh,
But yeah, so listen, I tell anyone that growing up playing junior tennis in Florida, I felt was the best training ground I could have asked for. I was kind of a late bloomer. I had a one-handed backhand. I liked to come
you
to
do.
the net.
I've seen the videos, and your backhand is very special. I'm just in awe of you.
I appreciate that. It looks maybe the form is perhaps better than the function, but I lost a lot when I was young. It took me a while to kind of get all of those pieces working. But I don't have to tell you, the competition in Florida, in South Florida in particular, which is where I was in the Palm Beach Gardens area, it was the best, and people wanted to win, and you had to learn how to win. You had to learn how to lose. You had to learn how to get difficult personalities. It's such amazing life training. So I was incredibly thankful for that, and then went off to play college tennis at Rice University in Houston. Florida prepared me for the humidity there.
That's right. It's a little drier over there in Texas and a little hotter, but I think you probably were well prepared to go there.
But I'll tell you, Houston might be worse than Florida.
I've been to Houston in August, and it was not pleasant. I will say that I have really good friends in Houston, and I was like, why do you live here? I don't understand.
I got that question a lot, but Rice was great and beautiful and wonderful. And then I got married a couple years after I graduated. My husband was playing baseball, and the good news with tennis, and in particular being a female tennis player, I could pretty much teach tennis wherever we went. I think we moved like 16 years in our first 3 years of moved 16 times in our first 3 years of marriage. But pretty much wherever I went, I was able to get a job, at least teaching some on the side, which was great because that can be tough for the significant other. And so it was during that time when I started doing some tennis writing. I'm an economics major, did not have a background in that. Had always liked writing, but definitely had zero actual training. And then from there, one thing led to another. When he was done playing baseball, I got a job at a tennis website, Tennis Now, and the rest is history.
Love it. Love it. And I think I knew that your husband played baseball. And I love learning like how much you knew, because one of my wonders about you is and I was like, how does she navigate this travel and this schedule that she has? But now it kind of has all come full circle that your family is just sort of like built that way, which is super cool. How did you end up making that transition though into like the interviewing and announcing side? So you were writing about tennis, super tennis fan, great tennis player. What was your first foray into the announcing side?
Quick aside, Laura, I just want to say that despite all the travel, I am still the worst packer possibly in travel history.
We need to do a what's in your bag, I think, like for you and your suitcase. Like, what's in Blair's bag?
It would be 10 minutes long, and I'm prepared for the apocalypse every time. But anyway, great question. So the website that I was working for, Tennis Now, as a writer, so I covered, the Australian Open, Roland Garros, Wimbledon, and the US Open, all four as a writer, which was great experience being in the media rooms, being in the interview room. But they also had a YouTube channel, and it was really well followed. We did, bi-weekly tennis news. I'm air quoting there for the people listening. Listen, the on-court stuff is great. I obviously like the technical side of tennis. I love the result side of tennis. I also am a firm believer that as great as somebody's forehand can be, it's usually something about their personality that makes the fan for life. And so we always tried to highlight more of the off-court stuff, the stuff that was maybe a little bit more fun, the quirkier news bits. So I really enjoyed that. It was a really cool community. And then in 2015, there was an opening on court 17 at the US Open. My very, very good friend, Nick McCarville. We're still the best of friends. He was on court 17, which for those who haven't seen court 17 at the US Open, it makes it sound like it's out in the boondocks somewhere. It is in the corner of the site, but it is one of my favorite. Actually, I have it right behind me right there. It is one of my favorite stadiums in tennis. It's the perfect size. There are no reserved seats, so you don't end up with empty seats closest to the court. I absolutely loved it. So Nick wasn't able to do it that year. And somehow my name from doing the Tennis Now YouTube videos was thrown out. And my still now boss at the US Open, Michael Fuhrer, was either desperate or a visionary. I don't know, but
I'm going to go with visionary. That's my vote.
he will still say, he's like, where's my cut, because he gave me my job and I had no other. It's funny because after you do the US Open, people think, oh well, she must be at least decent, and I had no live hosting experience at all before that. And that first year on court 17, every court there is televised on ESPN, but there was no stage manager. Like, I was literally taking account from the camera person. I was the one telling the players, like, stop, wait, you can't go yet. And they've never seen me before. And I'm 5'4",
you are, yeah,
running me over on the way out. And I'm, having to like body talk.
Don't you know who I am? Have you not seen YouTube? Stop now.
The answer is no, they are not. So anyway, it was incredible experience to essentially have to figure it all out on my own. I was even playing the music. I was the DJ. So I was doing all the things. And there was no better training than flying by the seat of your pants, essentially. And, listen, I had enough institutional knowledge of tennis. I had watched a million post-match interviews. I had studied that side of things. So I was again nervous but confident in the post-match interview side of things. I know I was reading through your questions for this, and one of the questions was sort of the live hosting aspect, or the interacting with the fans. That is so different, that you can say, okay, well, she can do stuff on camera. She can probably hang in this kind of arena. Doing the live hosting and interacting with the crowd and feeding off the crowd energy and trying to pump up the fans, that is a whole different ball game. It is not like being in a studio reading off a teleprompter. It is, you really have to be able to freestyle a little bit. You have to feel comfortable enough interacting. I feel like that is the part that I probably, again, I'm not spectacular, but I've probably improved the most in, just because you don't really understand how different it is until you're out there in a stadium and you have to try to connect. That can be really hard for people who are kind of more on the journalistic side of things. Like, let me ask you the question and get the answer. So the interacting with the crowd was something I just wasn't prepared for, how much different it was. So definitely had to learn on my feet, and it was the best training I could have asked for. And Del Rey was actually the next tournament that I did.
That's how we met, actually.
2016 Delray Beach. So I reached out to Marlena Hochberg now and John Butler, who was there for years, and they were kind enough, and again did have the reaction, well, she did the US Open, so she
must be good.
Little do they know I had no experience before that. But again, they gave me a shot in Del Rey, and in Del Rey, I will preach the 250s until the day that I die. I hope they never go away. I know there's talks of a super tour, et cetera, but people ask me all the time, what's your favorite tournament? Which tournament should I go to? And my answer is almost always a 250, because the access is beyond compare. There are no bad seats. You get to see players up close. You get to get a feel for their personality. It's the best. And so I was very thankful that I got opportunities stemming from that initial US Open, toe in the water experience.
And Del Rey, I tell people that's my favorite. I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but I guess now it's out there that I mean, it was the first tournament I ever went to in 2012. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this what tennis is like? Because this is pretty neat. You see the players are just walking by, I had no concept. And then I had gone to the Miami Open and US Open. I was like, okay, this is different. Miami Open was still at Crandon then, but you're right. The access is very different.
Yeah.
I love the Delray Beach Open and I love the 250s also. What I love about you and what you just said about the interaction with the crowd and being in that live environment is so often you see people who have such great tennis DNA, like the former champions, struggle with that at times, right? And so for you to be able to step in there and master that, I think, again, credit to your journalistic background, your communication, and everything, because I think you do that so exceptionally well. And I mean, I just love to see that out there. And I think it's always so impressive to me that you can do that, but you can also do the, hey, stop, sit here, camera guy, go there. Like you got all of these things going on at the same time and you just do it flawlessly. So if there's anything you think you're not doing well, I can tell you that none of us know it.
Well, I always say it helps to have giant teeth because even in the top row, you know that I'm smiling and I'm having the best time. It's my secret weapon. It's just my
so funny.
So
we do always see you smiling, and I always try to find you. Like when I'm at an event, I wanted to get a picture of you at Billie Jean King Cup, but you were sort of in a booth thing. And I was like, I know she's in there, but I can't get her in the picture. I always try to take a picture of you and I put it on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now. And I was like, hi, Blair Henley. Cause I always look for you. I'm like, where is she? If she's not on court, she's back in a booth somewhere. And I definitely look for you as soon as I hear the voice. I'm like, oh, Blair's here. This is great. And your voice is very distinctive. And one of the reasons I think that is because you're a female. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But before we get to that, since we're on the topic of events, how many do you do in a year? And what's the coolest one? I mean, obviously you did the Open, but that doesn't sound like that might not have been the coolest experience because it was your first and you were doing all of the things. So how many do you do? And what's the coolest one you've ever done?
And it's probably around 9 or 10 events a year. And some of those are, you get a couple that are shorter, like a Billie Jean King Cup qualifier tie, or I just got back from Paris. I was there for Wilson. So that wasn't a tournament event, but again, you got to be there, be part of a really cool pre Roland Garros event. So there's a little variety there, but yeah, I would say probably 9 or 10 a year. It's really hard with kids to figure out which ones, I love tennis. I'm also a competitive person and I want to be the best at my job that I can be. And so, there's a temptation to say yes to everything. If somebody asks me, I want to say yes, I want to be there. But life, there are other priorities. And so trying to figure out what makes the most sense has definitely become increasingly difficult. But to answer your question about which one is the coolest, I don't think anything will ever compare to being at Laver Cup for Roger's retirement.
I was going to ask you, I was like, I think she's going to say this, but I'm not sure. But I would have been my pick.
Oh my God. What's so funny is at Laver Cup, I've done little bits of, segments for broadcast. But what I do there is really pretty different from what I do anywhere else. I do a lot of the behind the scenes social media content that I capture on my phone. And so again, not what I normally do, but I always try to keep my eye on what's happening in the social world. And I like to make sure because it's changing and it's necessary. And so anyway, I'm always paying attention. So it's nice to sort of have one role a year where I'm more focused on that side of things. But because that was my role, I am no joke, like inches from sobbing.
I was going to ask if you cried because I would have been bawling.
So I am not an emotional person at all. And I'm thinking at the beginning, like, okay, I'm going to be able to hold this together. No, absolutely not. As I'm watching Andy try to hold it in, as I'm watching Rafa sobbing, Roger is a total emotional wreck, understandably. I'm like, oh, it's here we go. And I'm filming with I'm filming with my
So the
with my
tears are
phone.
just like, and you're like, I
Well,
can't do anything.
no, you know what I was trying I was doing is as they're like gathering in my eyeballs, envision a swimmer trying to shake water out of their ears.
You're
That
like,
was me trying to like shoot the tears. So that I didn't want, my makeup running. And I also was like, I am, listen, it's social media, but technically I'm in an official capacity here. Like I don't want to be, a blubbering mess. So I'm trying to like launch the tears out of the side of my head. Um, but that was an unforgettable
yeah.
moment. And honestly, one of my favorite pieces of being present for that happened after it was all over. Everybody had cleared out, everybody's saying their goodbyes. And if you remember, Rafa flew in just to play that match. He was expecting the arrival of Rafa Jr., and he flew in just for that. And I was standing after it was all over next to Andrew Krasny, who does a lot of the announcing in tennis, and our stage manager, Chrissy, who has also done a ton of tennis. And we're just sort of standing there, nobody's speaking. We're just being like, everybody was emotionally exhausted. And Rafa he has all his bags. He starts walking out, stops, turns around, sees us, walks all the way back. We were not that close to him, and gives us all like double cheek kisses and hugs and says, thank you so much. Before he left, presumably to hop on a private plane. Will forever be one of the sweetest tennis moments that I've ever experienced. And it's been interesting. He's talked a lot about his legacy and what he wants his legacy to be. And one of the things he said is, I want the people behind the scenes to remember me fondly.
He did say that. Yeah. And I thought that was amazing that he said, like, it's not about kind of the accomplishments on the court. It's how do the tournament employees and volunteers and people. Yeah.
Which was really specific, because there are absolutely players who have said, I hope I've made an impact on people. But he specifically talked about the people who work at these events. And you see every year he's taking pictures with the transport desk, or, the state. I mean, Chrissy, she's the one as a stage manager, she does all the walk-ons. Mm-hmm. This is what I did not have on court 17. Who make sure the player stays where they're supposed to be until it's time to walk out. Every time that Rafa sees her, it's, double cheek kiss, the whole, just really authentic. And when he says that, he is not messing around. That is Rafa in a nutshell. He has consistently been kind and paid attention and looked those people in the eyes that often don't get anyone looking them in the eyes. So again, this is a whole Rafa aside to this Roger experience, but it was tennis history, and we likely will not see any other players like Roger, Rafa, and probably Novak. Who knows? We thought that, and then there's Novak.
I don't know. We've got some talent coming in hot now, and hopefully that the way that Roger and Rafa have treated others actually inspires all of us to have that sense of humility and appreciation for all of the things that, sometimes we all take for granted. But I mean, I can't really say, you like, is there anything else? Because clearly there's nothing else that would compare to that. I did want to go back, though, to ask a follow-up question. You talked about the difference between stadium announcing and interviewing players. You taught us about Rafa, so we're going to have to put him over here for a minute. Who are your other favorite players? And are there any funny moments that you can share with us that you've had with these players?
This is such a hard question for me, because I like most people, like really like most people. And that's probably been one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is getting to know these athletes who have so many eyeballs on them, so much pressure on them on a week-to-week basis, and getting to know them as people, because tennis is a really lonely sport. So to become someone who can offer a smile or a hug or whatever, it's been the most rewarding part of my job by far. But on the women's side, gosh, Marina Sakari is wonderful. Ons Jabeur is wonderful. Maddie, all the Americans I've had a chance to get to know pretty well. Coco, Jesse, Maddie, Peyton Stearns, Emma Navarro. Like, it's a really incredible group of players. And they like each other. It's so interesting to see how, on the women's side in particular, where, it used to be sort of the Maria Sharapova approach where nobody's your friend. And if they're your friend, you're soft. And that's, potentially a weakness when you step out on the court. I feel like that things have really changed in that department. When I did the WTA finals, even a couple of years ago, you had Ons pranking Iga wearing a scary Halloween suit popping out from behind the backdrop during your interview. And I'm like, at the time it was I think the number 1 and 3 player in the world. And so that to me is really incredible and great for tennis. So on the women's side, the list goes on and on and on. Danielle Collins, a Florida girl who's doing incredibly well.
Incredible. She has close ties to our leadership. She grew up playing Florida tennis, and I loved when she won Miami and said, like, I'm a Florida girl, and this is where I'm from. And she shared that story about her dad when she said she wanted to go to the Miami Open, and he said you can go and you play in it. And I thought that was like an amazing story, and just her genuineness comes through as well with her. We're so proud to have her and Ben and Coco here in Florida, and Tommy's doing great. I mean, we're having sort of this renaissance in Florida again. Like we sort of had, years ago you had Courier and Marty and Andy, and now we're sort of having like this generation come through, and Sophia. You just got so many that I feel like we probably annoy people because they're like, we have the Florida players, and I'm like, yeah, that's us. Hey.
That's a good thing, especially in your role for sure. But yeah, so many on the women's side. On the men's side, same. I do a lot of the 250s in the US. And so again, I get to know a lot of the American players, like an Alex Mickelson, for instance, last summer, plays Newport, gets a wild card, is still at the time committed to play college tennis at Georgia, reaches the final. And then you've potentially met this player that may or may not remember you for the rest of his career because you were there for that very first landmark moment in their pro tennis lives. So that has been really cool to meet a lot of these players when they're younger. Definitely all of the American guys. Tommy Paul, I still think is underrated. One of the, maybe not so much underrated as a player. I think people are seeing the talent level that he has, but
I think he's underestimated for sure. Yeah. Very much underestimated. In fact, they did a really good feature on him in Florida Tennis Magazine recently, and I thought that was very well done. And I agree with you. Very underestimated. And yeah,
just the nicest. Also, like he's because he's the chillest dude you'll ever meet. I mean, he's the most normal guy ever, and his entire team: Brad Stein, Hugo Armando, who was an incredible Florida tennis player back in the day. Franco Herrero, who does his fitness training down in South Florida. It's just a really incredible group. I tell everybody, I'm like, Tommy Paul is the best. Nice and friendly and a quality human. So, in terms of the people I like talking to on the men's side, I mean, we could be here forever. Grigor couldn't be nicer. Matteo Berrettini is also wonderful and just personable and is happy to sit there and well, quick aside here. Sometimes when you're doing these interviews, whether it's on court or pre-tournament, you get the feeling that the subject wants to be anywhere else than sitting right in front of you. They're like mentally, they're not maybe physically looking at their watch. Mentally, it's like, how long has this been?
Yeah, how long do I have to stay here? Can I leave?
Yes. So it is, like a Stefanos Tsitsipas who you feel like he could sit there with you all day and talk about philosophy or the latest thing that he's watching on YouTube, or that becomes so much more appreciated and valued, probably the more of this sort of thing that you do, because you know that there are players who are like, oh, get me out of here. Understandably. Listen, they have to do the fact that tennis players have to go from stop to stop and essentially do the same thing every week for a different, group of media. That's exhausting. It's different than, say, basketball, where so many of the people, yes, like they're having to do press conferences after every game, but so many of those media members cover basketball all year long. You're not going and meeting different members of the media in different cities, some of which don't cover tennis at all until
they're probably asking the same questions, where when you're looking at the coverage and domestically, and the example you just gave, these same reporters have covered them the whole season. So they're not like, oh, let me go back to the beginning and explain to you like how I got there. And it's like, I think about that too, with like, how many times have these athletes got asked the exact same question of like, what was your strategy in that match? And what do you think you could do better? And I'm like, gosh, that must be tedious at times, where, it would be hard to show enthusiasm. I probably would want to talk about philosophy too. So I'd be in this stuff and it's like, let's bring another subject in that's more interesting.
Which can be so great. And that is the nice thing about getting to know them personally, is there is a little bit more latitude for going off the beaten path. And sometimes when you go off the beaten path, you get some piece of gold content that gets seen by far more people than, what are the conditions like here in blah, blah, blah. So not that those aren't important questions, but it's nice when you know them, because you can maybe go a little bit, outside the box in terms of your questions. But gosh, I mean, Felix Auger-Aliassime is wonderful. Francis Tiafoe, oh gosh, Chris Eubanks is as great as everybody says, just the most wonderful human. So yeah, so many. And as far as funny stories, I feel like there have been tons of funny stories, but I have a theme for you because I have a little recency bias here. But in Houston this year, I was talking to Zizou Bergs, the Belgian, who just qualified and won his very first match at a major at Roland Garros. And he's going to break into the top 100, which is something he's really been working toward. But he's, got a whole TikTok following. He's kind of a modern player in the sense that he's made his own content. But I may have spoken to him briefly or did a quick hello, but I had never sat down and done an interview with him until Houston. And I was asking all the players in Houston, which is the first clay tournament for most of those guys of the year. And I'm asking them all, to describe their relationship with clay. And Zizou launches into this 1 minute. It was long. It was probably 30 seconds to a minute on clay. He's saying clay, but he's describing what sounds like a person. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm so confused. Where is he going with this? I don't understand. Is there a language barrier? We finally, along with my camera person, finally figure out he's talking about Clay Snipeman, who is the ATP physio, who's on site in Houston.
Oh, that's
famous Clay. And by the end of this long, drawn out, he's got a funny personality. He's really funny. And we have a side bet going on. And I'm thinking, Clay? I absolutely lost it. I thought it was so hysterical. And he has such a great personality and such a great sense of humor. He laughed right along with me. And anyway, the video ended up getting tons of views. And this is, for some people, maybe the first time they're seeing Zizou Bergs, who again has a fantastic personality. And that is what that's what makes fans for life, in my opinion. So that was funny. There was another in that same vein last summer with Casper Ruud. I was in Canada, in Toronto, and we were doing usual media day, social media stuff. But one of the questions that I needed to ask him was about the Champions of Equity conference that Tennis Canada does. Mm-hmm. And so, the women, it was obviously female focused, and they had some really great female leaders in the industry, outside the industry. And so I was asking some of the men's players, what does equity mean to you? And Casper, and this was totally my fault, I did not give a good enough explanation of what we were talking about. Okay. Casper was into his investing philosophy. Equity. Like 20 seconds in, and I was like, Casper, that is great advice, great thoughts. on
Our
economic.
investment advisors are going to love that.
I'm sorry, that is actually not what I meant. Totally my fault. I did not explain it well. We're talking about, social equity anyway. And he proceeds to, of course, as Casper does, he is I think he's only 23, 24. He presents when you're speaking to him as somebody so much older, more mature, gave an incredible answer of what social equity, men's, women's equity means to him. But those two were actually very similar. And I asked a question, it went a completely different
way. But you got some good gold content out of it. I feel that way about Coco in terms of just the maturity. My niece is 22 and my nephews are 20 and 18. And even speaking to them, the younger generations, I feel like they have so much more maturity and awareness and just, awareness of the world, right? Than, other generations did. And it's super impressive to see the young people coming up in tennis that, have, they're very articulate. They can communicate their thoughts, opinions. They're very secure in those. It's really wonderful to see them out there and that they know about equity in both senses.
Exactly right. But it's so interesting, Laura, that I find sometimes it can go the other direction where you have professional athletes who have been insulated their entire lives and end up being somewhat stunted socially, intellectually, and to have so many players who are on the other end of the spectrum as far as that goes is even more impressive, because it is when you were shot out of a cannon fame wise at such a young age, it can be so easy to just live a really insulated life. And what teams look like now, where you really are surrounded at all times with people who could very easily be yes people and could, even as a 20-year-old tell you what you want to hear, because technically that 20-year-old is your boss.
It's paying your bills. Yeah, exactly.
So it makes you appreciate the Cocos of the world even more, because it can so easily go the other direction.
We're talking about equity, so that is a really good segue into my next question. I'm not sure how many women are actually doing what you're doing. Obviously, you have the women we see, like the Chrissy Everts and the individuals that we see on TV, but what you were doing is really special in my mind, because as you just referenced, typically you got your start in this business because there was a man in that space that couldn't do that opportunity. And kudos to you that you were like, I'll take it, yes, I'll do it and I'll figure it out as I go. Do you see particular challenges for women in this space? And maybe what advice would you give to other women who might want to follow in your footsteps?
This is a really interesting question. I've thought about it because I've been asked about it before. And I will tell you, I feel like tennis is a sport that is in general really open and fair. If you work hard, if you have the skill set, if you've put in the work, I feel like there are opportunities and there are people who are willing to take chances on you. I think the tough part about tennis is the fact that it's so darn small. There just aren't a lot of openings. Yeah. And so I'm sure there are people out there who are incredibly talented and would be wonderful. There just aren't a lot of slots. Even for me, I would love to do more broadcast work. I'm not a former top 100 player. I know my way around a tennis court, but there's a difference between that and being a top 50 player or a former top 50 player in the world. So I feel like I know that there are talented people out there. It's just finding an opening and hanging around, or possibly doing something else in tennis that maybe you don't like quite as much, waiting for that minute, that put me in coach minute, where you have a chance to do what you really want to do. And I get a lot of young people, and I try to pay it forward as much as I can, asking me, how do I do what you do? And I often recommend starting at a tournament. That is sort of the gateway to so many things, because if you are good and you know the game and you're a hard worker and you're diligent, word travels fast. And so again, that's sort of the positive side of tennis being a small world, is once you get in and you do a good job, other people are going to know about it, but it just might take a minute because there just aren't physical positions open. There was another side of this that I was thinking, and it's left me.
It's interesting because when I think of like other sports, when you look at women who are doing like sideline reporting, let's say, like it's a really interesting dynamic that has shifted a lot over time. It's like you used to have the men commentating on football and the women were always the sideline reporter, right? And you had women, obviously they haven't played football, but they're able to do that work. And now you have some incredible women that are actually leading these all female broadcasts, which are phenomenal to see, like the Elle Duncans of the world and the others that are like, I can command this space, right? And talk about all things sport, not just this piece. So I think about that and I think about, you know what? I actually don't, does it matter so much that you weren't a top 50 player? Like we have women commentating on all kinds of sports and, it's changed a lot, I guess, over the years. And I think that advice that you gave was really good. Like it doesn't, there's not a pathway that's like, you do this, and you get here. It's like, keep doing things, keep doing good work, and those doors will open and be ready when they do to step through them. So I just wanted to emphasize that for a minute, because I think it's such an important point for the girls and the women listening that maybe are, hey, I'd like to pursue that career.
And even, a recent example in my life, the USTA has trusted me with, I did my first solo commentary week on the USTA Pro Circuit for an ATP Challenger in Savannah. And I am fortunate enough to get to do another one in South Dakota in October, if anybody wants to come.
Ooh, that actually sounds fun. That sounds like it would be beautiful and snowy and cold. So like more suitcases for you.
I love indoor tennis, like no rain, no delays.
That's right.
But the USTA has, was trusting of me in that role. And I'm commentating, obviously, these are men's challengers. So I think there's a lot of trust out there if people can see sort of your track records. That's not to say I was amazing out of the gate. I have a lot of work to do, but to be able to say, okay, we know that she's going to, again, put in the work to get to a place where she wants to be in the commentary space. So that's great. One area where I will say I am conscious of the fact that I am a woman is at the negotiating table. One thing that I think people maybe don't think of when they think about life as a freelancer is if I do 10 events a year, I am negotiating 10 different contracts a year. And I do that myself. I've learned a lot from that, but I feel like women, when they negotiate, tend to be seen as, and this isn't true of all bosses, but some see women as irritating, asking for more than they're worth, et cetera, versus a man negotiating. I feel like it's more expected and it's almost seen as a point of respect. Okay, well, they know their worth and they're not going to settle for anything less. That is the one area where I feel like I have been conscious of being aware of the perception, and that has possibly affected the way that I have put myself out there in the financial sense. So I've definitely gotten more fearless over the years, for sure. But that has sort of been the one area where I feel like I've been conscious of the fact that I am a woman, and how in that particular space, even if it's subconscious, you are perhaps seen slightly differently than you would be if you were a man in that same space.
Are you often negotiating with men?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's an interesting dynamic, and I will say I can only speak for myself, but similar. I think anytime there's sort of a negotiation, whether it's over pay or any other thing that you want, there's an absolute difference. But it's also different, if you've ever had the opportunity to negotiate with a woman, it's such a different dynamic, and there's not enough of those opportunities to say, I'm asking for what's important for me. And like you said, that should be valued and respected no matter who you are. But as women, most of us have had bad experiences. I had my very first job. I think I asked for a higher pay and it was like, you make good money for a woman, was the comment. And I said, oh, I'm pretty sure my bills
Yeah.
aren't different because I'm a woman. That did not engender me any favor with my boss at the time. This was in the 90s. And
Did you,
quick I quickly left that job.
but did you actually say that back?
I actually said that. I was very naive at the time. I think I was like, this makes no sense. Like, why would you say that to me? Like, I had no idea. But of course, after that, I just thought to myself, wow, that was such a bad reaction to me asking for pay. Like, maybe not ask for pay anymore. Or sometimes we feel like we're so lucky we got this opportunity that we take what's offered, because it's like, if I say no to this, I'm never going to get it again. And then once I get in the door, it'll be fair. And I think that a lot of women have that. And I appreciate you saying it out loud, because we don't talk about it enough as women, and we don't sit and help each other as women. And I find when I've had this conversation with other women, they've said that when a woman has stepped up to say, let me help you negotiate this, and let me help you review your contract with you and say what's fair and what's not, that we feel a little bit more empowered to go back to the table and say, absolutely, this is what I want. And I think we kind of need to say it more. So thank you for bringing that. I didn't expect that answer, and I really appreciate it, genuinely.
Well, like I said, I've had to think this through of what the differences are, if any. And I don't think there are. It depends. Sometimes there aren't differences, and I think that there are absolutely opportunities that I've had because I'm a woman. I am very aware of that as well. But at the negotiating table, that is a place. And like you said, I think it's further complicated by the fact that we work in sports and there aren't a lot of opportunities. And so there is the fear that if you push too hard, like, how hard can I push to get what I feel like is fair, but also to still have this job that I need, because there aren't a lot of other jobs. It's really a tough balance. You wish you had a crystal ball, but it's one of the things, as far as being a freelancer in particular, because you have to do that so many times throughout the year. I am so thankful to the people in tennis who I feel like have treated me incredibly fairly. Sometimes I've had people who I work for who have given me a raise, like, hey, we saw you did this thing that was extra. We're going to add that into your paycheck. Listen, is that the norm? No, but it sure makes you appreciate those people who are paying attention and want you to feel valued as an employee, because guess what? If you feel valued as an employee, you are willing to do all the extra things. And you want to do all the extra things because you want them to have the event of their dreams and you want to contribute to that. So yes, this is, I feel like, a whole other podcast.
We have to do part two on this one.
I feel like we could talk forever.
We are going to have more pods. I say that you are welcome anytime. We're talking about progress in a lot of ways. So I wanted to kind of broaden that focus just a little bit. And over the last few years, we've seen, some changes in tennis that maybe because of COVID or other reasons were sort of ushered in and have changed, maybe, I think, for the better, the experience. So we've got electronic line calling happening at a lot of tournaments now, including Delray Beach, right? Which is a big change. And you've got the serve clock, which also is a big change. Obviously your husband, being from baseball, knows you have a pitch clock now, which is actually kind of a neat thing. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that. I think baseball needs a little speeding up. So I'm a huge fan. And do you think about other things on the pro side, or is there one particular thing on the pro side that you're like, oh, if we could change one thing that would make this experience better, this is what I would change?
The thing that comes up the most often by far from the players is the actual ball that they're playing with, and wanting to have that be more consistent, and not only consistent from tour stop to tour stop, but even certain brands having balls that the players are like, this is not that kind of ball that I want to play. Something that, fluffs up after 10 minutes on court, that can actually have an effect. The margins are so incredibly small at the professional level, and, a 5% difference in how a ball plays can have a massive effect on an elbow or a wrist, or, name the body part. So I feel like that is going to be something that will likely have to be addressed. I don't know that there is a blanket fix because there are different sponsors and there are different manufacturers. And, I don't see us going to a single tennis ball all year round. But I know that at least on the ATP side, there is some experimenting being done with certain balls that have gotten the most complaints in terms of how can the quality on those particular balls be improved. So again, I think that behind the scenes, they're hearing those things. It'll be interesting to see what happens in future years. I do wonder if something like the PTPA is going to take hold. They are doing some things, but I think it's more of, okay, it's been started, it exists, but what is it actually going to do for players going forward? Don't know the answer to that yet. So that will be interesting to see. The 2-week Masters 1000s. Listen, do I see it changing back? Probably not, because it's all about money. That's what most things come down to, and ticket sales and broadcast deals. The broadcast money is where so much of the money in tennis comes from. But I don't know that there are many people who love them. And so again, and we haven't even seen sort of the full layout, like, next year, right? Toronto or Canada and Cincinnati will both be 2 weeks. I will be very interested to see what players, and really it needs to be the players who have an issue with it. If they do, maybe once the whole calendar, the revised calendar is rolled out, people will say, okay, this isn't so bad. I have no idea. I think as somebody who often sees the fan perspective, I want the slams to be special. I want the slams to be something we don't see all the time. And listen, the Cincinnati campus, with all the money that's being poured in there, it's going to be essentially a slam if it's 2 weeks long. Yeah. And having that right before the US Open, I just want fans to have a clear idea of where to watch and what type of tournament this is and what are the stakes. And I want them to have value for their tickets. That was one of the coolest things about the 1 week Masters 1000 is, you're going on a Friday and you're seeing all the quarterfinals. The value for the ticket out of 1000 is so incredible because of that. And then you spread it all out and it's a little bit different. Does tennis need money? Yes. So love the idea of more money brought in. But I think long term, people have to be paying attention to the sport for it to make money down the road. And so again, this is too long of an answer to say. I want to see what happens.
I think that's a beautiful answer, and all the complicated things that, probably the people listening to this podcast know, but most of the people in the world don't understand those dynamics either, about the cost of running a tournament going up, right? And so it's like, exactly to your point, like, you can't fit any more matches in a day. So the only way that you can bring in more revenue if the costs are higher is to expand it. But also to your point, like, from a consumer, not just the player side, which is very important. From a consumer side, how many more people could we get interested in this game if they were able to see tennis on weekends regularly, right? So you've got perfect examples here in Florida. You've got Miami Open and you've got Delray Beach Open, right? And when you look at the two, Delray Beach is much more accessible to the fans, honestly, from like a ticketing perspective and other things. And then you have things like the Sarasota Open and others that are also very, very accessible. It's like, how do we make those shine brighter and really get people more interested so that they can see tennis all the time? Because that is what's going to drive the fan base. And if we could get that experience better, particularly for the lower level players, I think, who are really, at times struggling. I have no answers. I do not operate in this space. I am wholly focused on the community side of the house. But it is fascinating. Like you said, there's so many different pieces to the puzzle that make it complex, from TV to local to paying the player to everything, prize money, everything, that I think sometimes people, not you, but others, like, just underestimate the complexity. It doesn't work like baseball or football or anything else. It's really just this unique beast of a thing that Shout out to all of the smart humans that are trying to figure that one out.
Exactly. I'm glad it's not my problem.
Exactly. That is not in my purview. Although, like you, I'm kind of interested to see how it kind of comes out, and not just next year, but obviously the future of tennis and the tours is top of mind. Last question. Are there any other insights you'd like to share with our audience today? Like maybe your predictions for Roland Garros? No pressure.
If only we had like a running tally of how bad my predictions have been my entire tennis career. So take this with less than a grain of salt. But I am going to say on the women's side that Arena is going to get her revenge on Vika,
okay.
and is going to win Roland Garros. And on the men's side, I am going to say fourth time is the charm for Casper Ruud. He's going to get to the final and he's going to win it. I think he is such a sleeper. I think despite the fact that he's reached 3 major finals, people were like, it's Casper Ruud. I think he, especially coming in on the heels of a win, I just think he is the way that he goes about things is so incredibly professional, that don't sleep on Casper Ruud and or his equity or financial knowledge.
That's right. He's got equity on lock. And of course, we're always rooting for Americans here, and particularly our Florida players. So we will be locked to the TV in the Florida land. So, I appreciate you sharing your projections. I will say the only reason I hope you're wrong is so that it's an American or Florida player in there.
Danielle Collins.
You know what? You do not sleep on her. You do not sleep on Danielle. She is on fire right now. And of course, that's the beauty of tennis. You never quite know. Anybody can have a good day, a bad day. And depending on how the draw shapes out, you could end up with some amazing different people in the finals, which is always amazing to see. So thank you so much for all the time you spent with me today. We need to do this again for sure. And I'm just really, really happy to see you. And I can't wait to hear your voice again at the next tournament.